Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan, and I did not expect to be talking about Rings of Power so much, but the news around it has just been so vitriolic and so insane. The backlash from both critics and fans in different aspects, of course, the critics being all positive and attacking fans, whereas the fans are taking a much more nuanced approach and saying, hey, we just don't like this show. That whole drama is getting out of hand, and there's just so much to talk about that it feels like every video I make these days is about Rings of Power, and today is no different because we have a whole new stream of cringe from the Axis and mainstream medias about this. Even the Mary Sue has jumped in to talk about the supposed review bombing situation. And the thing that none of these people talk about is that none of these reviews on the sites that you can review or online reviews or anything like that are talking about the racism stuff anymore. None of them are talking about the race swaps really for the most part. None of them are doing anything like that. They're all talking about the script. That's what I focused near the entirety of my review on. I talked about lore a little bit, but the majority of it was on the terrible writing, characterization, and dialogue. And that's true for pretty much every other review I've seen for this show, whether or not it's on Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, YouTube, anything like that. It's all been about the writing, the characterization, and the presentation of it. There's just so much wrong with the show that it drowns out the race swapping and all that. So it's not about the racism, as we'll get into in a minute here, but the review bombing, they all provide really great evidence for why they dislike it. It's crazy. I know, it's just unfathomable that people just dislike your show. And I've gone into that in another video of why I definitely don't believe that the review bombing's happening. That'll be linked above. But yeah, the Mary Sue is even jumping in with all the customary bullet points of the mainstream and Axis media. I won't go into it because it's just pathetic and cringe. But we've also got Whoopi Goldberg jumping in on this situation, and her comments are really pathetic. The last important thing she did was a Star Trek The Next Generation. Besides that, she's basically irrelevant in my world, at least. And the view is she just has so many terrible comments, especially the one about, that certain event in World War II was just a bunch of white people killing each other, so it was okay. So she's not necessarily a good person that these woke people want to put up as a paragon of virtue, but they do it anyway because, it's Whoopi Goldberg. But she has just some really cringe thoughts about Rings of Power and House of the Dragon. She doesn't even get their names right. She doesn't even know what's going on. And she's just saying, oh, they're fake people. Why can't black people be fake people too? They've been fake people since the invention of the camera. It's okay. And yeah, her comments are just insane. And it's funny how she's grouping Rings of Power and House of the Dragon together, because House of the Dragon isn't receiving the same criticism as Rings of Power, despite it featuring a lot of the same race swaps and stuff like that as Rings of Power did. The difference is a lot of people think House of the Dragon is well written, and that can win over anyone, including me. I rather enjoyed this episode 3 of House of the Dragon. So she's looping them together, but there really hasn't been a whole lot of racist backlash to either of them, obviously, but there hasn't been a review bombing for House of the Dragon. It seems like something weird's going on there. Everyone else is just ignoring the fact that they feature the same type of changes that should feature the same type of review bombing and racist backlash, but they're not. It's weird. It's almost as if it's about the writing, like all these reviews have been saying. But yeah, most of her comments are entirely irrelevant, and she's just so uneducated on these subjects that it isn't even worth going into. But this article from NBC is just really where it gets very vitriolic. A new Lord of the Rings prequel quietly confronts an uncomfortable legacy. How Amazon's The Rings of Power prequel grapples with the deeply ingrained ideas of racial differences and racial determinism in J.R.R. Tolkien's world. I think you're missing the point that he defines race differently than we do these days, because yeah, different races, elves, dwarves, they have their different predispositions, but that isn't black versus white. And so I think he's getting very confused. And then he goes into he's not as outright racist apparently as someone like H.P. Lovecraft, but it is fairly straightforward case to make the books include racist ideas. So now they're attacking J.R.R. Tolkien, saying, oh yeah, he was racist, so it makes sense why everyone who likes his books are racist too. It's this really pathetic stuff, and normally, I've never done this before actually. I haven't brought the author into question in a situation like this. I haven't researched them at all, but something came to my attention that this man, he has a history. So yeah, Noah, I can't pronounce that last name, who wrote this NBC article, he seems to want to normalize a certain aphilia that I don't think is a good thing to be. So he's already displayed that he's not really a great person, and this thing is just as bad as racism, at least in my opinion. So I don't think he's really one to talk. So normally I wouldn't bring that in, but that was just such an extreme idea and extreme take that he's judging someone for something that he's even just as bad in a different area. But he provides zero evidence on why he's racist, besides that elves and dwarves are different. He doesn't even go into the white versus black and, the modern day version of racism. So he gets very confused with the different definitions of the word race. Yet he provides absolutely zero substantial proof to prove that J.R.R. Tolkien was racist. He just says, oh, the races are different, and some people are fair of skin, and then just zero proof beyond that, except for, of course, he was born a long time ago, so obviously he's a racist. Discounting the fact that he fought against a lot of crazy shit. He was adamantly against the certain people in Germany both times. He is not a racist. There is no proof to the contrary, and he has numerous letters that prove he's not a racist, but this man doesn't care about it. This man just cares about, old guy is obviously racist, and since diversity in new show and fans don't like, they racist. Oh, they all racist together. It is honestly some of the most retarded shit I've ever read. And Amazon clearly agrees with this man that all backlash to the show is racist, despite not showing any actual proof. No proof was provided throughout all these accusations, but Amazon clearly agrees because they put out this statement, we stand in solidarity with you. You are all welcome. That ties into the release of the Hobbits, what I'll get into in a second. But also they have this other statement here that is just really, really cringe. We're all proud of the cast that we have in the show. We welcome discussion and even criticism around the show. Oh, you welcome criticism? Then why is no one allowed to review your goddamn show? If you welcome criticism, there would be a potential, even after your supposed 72-hour ban to prevent trolls. You're silencing criticism, and you're preventing people from reviewing your show, and then you're just calling everyone racist with zero proof. They won't even allow people to honestly review this show on their own platform. So yeah, they obviously don't care about criticism, legitimate criticism. However, we don't condone racism of any kind. Again, show us receipts, show us proof. It's not about that. And then on their other platform, which they own, and proof here, who owns IMDb? Amazon. They are clearly review bombing positively, which I've gone into on a previous video, and then preventing any review being seen that is below 6 out of 10. Look here, I've filtered it by review and descending, and nothing comes up that is below 6.10, even though clearly here there are some reviews under 6 out of 10. Out of 6 out of 10. There's a few below here, but they're incapable of seeing it. So this is a lie. They do not condone criticism, legitimate or not, because yeah, the majority of this, if not all of this, is legitimate below there, and some of this might be legitimate. Some people may legitimately think that it is a 10 out of 10. I don't understand those people. I don't believe it, but if there were legitimate criticism, you would allow criticism to be on your platforms, both of them, and some negative criticism. What the hell is with this lie? Again, it's not about racism because there's zero proof of racism, and every single interaction that I have seen, and I've seen a lot, is about the writing. And the majority of people say that Disa, who we all thought was going to be the worst part of the show, is actually the best part of the show. I don't go to those extremes, but she was better than I expected. So all these people who are being accused of racism think that the diversity is one of the best parts of the show. It's insane what this company and the access to mainstream medias are doing to protect this damn show. Amazon Prime is lying about their numbers, which I've gone into in multiple previous videos, and now they're lying about the type of criticism that they are receiving. There's just so much going on with Rings of Power. It's insane to keep up with all this supposed backlash. And even Neil Gaiman, who he wrote one of my favorite Doctor Who episodes, The Doctor's Wife. That's basically all I know him for. He's even saying that if you're criticizing the race swaps in Rings of Power, you're either racist or haven't read Tolkien. Now that's another pathetic attempt because people have read Tolkien. These people who are criticizing it, they know it backwards and forwards, and that's not something that you can criticize them with, and they can easily disprove you, and that's just a pathetic response. And it's also just ignoring the legitimate criticism that race swaps can be labeled with. But then again, hardly anyone is talking about the race swaps right now, and none of these people are providing proof for the supposed racism. Lenny Henry's not providing proof. Ishmael Cordova is not providing proof. None of these diverse characters in Rings of Power are providing proof that they've received any racist backlash whatsoever. Give us your receipts. Hey, he said that he's been told to go back to Africa. Show us that DM if that's the case. Show us proof. And you can just condemn those individual people. I doubt it's on any sort of scale, just like the Moses Ingram situation. All they could muster up was like 3 or 4 racist comments, and some of them weren't even actually racist. They were just trolls. They weren't about racism. They were just like, hey, you suck as an actress. That's not racist. But you just condemn those individuals and don't apply the criticism of those individuals who are racist to the entire fan base. And that's what absolutely is happening with the Rings of Power. It's basically a narrative of, if you don't like the show, you're racist, and then they don't provide proof for that. Just condemn the few people who are doing it, because I can't imagine it's that many people. It's just incredibly pathetic. And now they've roped in people that we actually like into this narrative, and that's the original Hobbits. And they made these shirts too fast. They had these shirts up and ready a couple days after the premiere. That was too fast. They had this prepared. They were prepared for this. And like the Elvish is like, you're all welcome here. This is kind of sad, because I don't even think they're realizing what's actually happening here. Because again, the reviews aren't talking about racism. The reviews aren't talking about the race swaps. They're talking about the writing, and they haven't provided any proof of actual racism. So they've been roped into this, and I doubt they've been provided proof. I doubt they know anything. It's just like, oh, people are being racist. Oh, we got to fight racism, which is a good thing. So I don't blame them necessarily. I just think that they're a little out of the loop on this situation and don't realize that there's not really anything going on untoward or actually racist. So it's just kind of sad to see them. Sean Astin's been roped into it as well, in a different image. But yeah, they had these ready to go. These t-shirts, these hats that they made, they were ready to go before the premiere, in my opinion, because yeah, they just got it way too quickly, in my opinion. It's just a whole lot of stuff going on. But you know what's not getting this type of backlash? That the cast doesn't have to dress up like this, and the cast of the original show doesn't have to dress up like this to say, hey, we're against racism, even though this other show does all the same things, race swaps, all that. But it doesn't need to do this, and that is House of the Dragon, which actually increased viewership for episode 3 by a substantial margin, 27% higher compared to episode 2. It's a miracle to get up between episodes 1 and 2 by a few percentage, but 27%, 2 to 3, is astronomical. That is incredibly impressive, well within the realm of possibility versus the Rings of Power viewing numbers for episodes 1 and 2, but this is incredible to see, and it's got all the same opportunities for criticism that is supposedly being labeled at the Rings of Power. If the racists were really out there rampant in the fantasy community, why aren't they attacking House of the Dragon? Why aren't they review bombing it? Why are they just hating on it without actually watching the show, as they're being accused of? It's because it's not about racism. It's not about review bombing. It is about a good show that's written well, or at least competently, versus a show that is written by a 2-year-old with crayon. And yes, there could be a racism argument made around House of the Dragon, but they don't need to, because there's nothing there. It's just so interesting to see the different approaches between these two shows and the studios behind them. And House of the Dragon, I'm so glad it came out near the same time as Rings of Power, because it's the perfect comparison for everything. Like everyone who said, oh, you went into Rings of Power with a bias, so you were never going to like it. I went into that House of the Dragon with the same type of bias, but it won me over. So Rings of Power could have done the same thing. Oh, it had the same type of race swaps, but there's not the same racist backlash supposedly for House of the Dragon. Oh, that must mean that Rings of Power is lying about everything that's going on. It's just so easy comparison in every sort of criticism that is labeled against us for Rings of Power, that it's so easy. And then even just on a review platform like Rotten Tomatoes, where it's clearly incredibly unreliable, but you can kind of siphon out the general consensus with a little bit of effort, even on something as worthless as Rotten Tomatoes usually, it's not getting review bombed supposedly like Rings of Power is. Look at that. Audience and critics agree for once. That's like the only thing that I look at. If they're close, that means it might actually be a good show, or that when they're in agreement, that might be truth. And so I tend to actually believe the score. It's a little higher than I would give it, but I usually am a lot more strict with my numbering than the majority of people. But that I can believe. I believe the score is accurate, surprisingly. Who's review bombing it? It's got race swaps in it too. It's got prominent, diverse characters. It's almost as if it's not about racism. It's almost as if it's about writing. And House of the Dragon is written at least better. And Rings of Power, still got the same critic review, but the audiences are hating it. There's not that many races out there. They act like it's every third person is a devout racist. It's a lot smaller community than that of racism in America. And it's not about that. It's about the writing. And the clear comparison is just so easy and so straightforward that anyone could figure it out, except for these mainstream media sites who just can't fathom the difference between House of the Dragon and Rings of Power. It's these corporate elites who they don't actually watch this stuff. It's these reviewers who have lost all credibility because of their access media that they can't tell the difference anymore between good and bad. They just see the superficial attributes that the actors have and assume that everything is related to that because that's how they see the world, incredibly racist. And so they just can't fathom that maybe it's about the writing and maybe everything that's happening to Rings of Power is legitimate criticism. I have seen zero evidence for review bombing for Rings of Power or House of the Dragon. And it's just interesting to see the cope that is coming out from these access media sites and Amazon itself, who still hasn't released their reviews, despite it being well over 72 hours like they said they would. Maybe it's because all this dislike for the show is legitimate. And there's nothing you can do about legitimate criticism. It will find a way to come out. And roping in the original cast isn't enough. That's not going to help. That's not going to make a difference because anyone who's actually disliking the show knows that they're disliking it for the right reasons, and they've seen zero evidence for racism because they haven't provided any evidence of racism from these access media and mainstream media sites. It's just a whole clusterfuck of a situation with the Rings of Power marketing, the Rings of Power backlash, the Rings of Power access media and mainstream media copes, and Amazon's cope as well. Now, I really want to see what the viewership numbers for episode 3 are. I doubt they'll release them because they only really release fake numbers or astronomical numbers when things are done very, very well. But that would be a number that I would want to see how steep the dip off is, because you can just feel it on the internet, even just out in the real world, people I interact with generally hating it. Even people who haven't seen Lord of the Rings, haven't read the books, or just normies who saw the movies once, it's a universal dislike that I've seen across the board from people who are usually consumers, who usually just lap everything up. Even those far consumers are saying, it's legitimate criticism. It's legitimate dislike. It is not review bombing, and it is not racist. It is about the writing, and they just can't fathom that. It's incredibly interesting to see how bad these sites and Amazon are reacting to legitimate criticism. They just can't take it. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Anon. If you like what I do here and want to see good, compelling stories that Hollywood will no longer give you, check out my book series, Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues. Books 1, Down in Flames, and Book 2, Apocalypse Then, currently on sale. Book 3, Kill the Dark, coming soon.